Radio.
Hello and welcome to Crypto Current, the only podcast to bring you beginner and advanced knowledge of cryptocurrency and blockchain, analyses of cryptocurrency markets, and discussions on growing a business within the crypto space. Stay tuned and stay crypto current.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Crypto Current. Your host here, Richard Carthon. And today we have a special guest, Mr. Allan Gulley from the University of Auburn, working on some really spectacular projects that I'm excited for everyone to learn a little bit more on. So, Allan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Richard.
Of course, man. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and give us a little background.
Sure. So like you said, my name is Allan Gulley. I am a senior manager at the Auburn University RFID Lab. I'm also a certified blockchain solutions architect and security professional, as well as a recent graduate of Auburn University. Now, I don't have quite the extensive background as many of the other guests you had on the show, but I will do my best to run you through real quick what I have been able to accomplish so far. So I've always, had side hustles going here and there, but the first legitimate venture that I went out on was a small e-commerce company in 2015. We actually utilized Kickstarter to launch our first product and get a little working capital into the business. And great experience. I actually sold my shares in that recently. Got a lot of good experience in drop shipping, crowdfunding, digital marketing, all the different aspects that go into a small e-commerce business. And it was pretty exciting to do that then. I think that I learned best from experience. And so I really enjoyed getting my hands dirty and getting into the nitty gritty and learning as much as I could from that entire venture. Last time I checked with my partner that's running it now, the distribution of the products that we sold span across 6 continents and 14 countries. And that a lot of that was organic. We really didn't push too much online advertising, but altogether great experience. And it definitely contributed to the work that we're doing now in several ways. But in 2017, I actually got plugged into the RFID Lab at Auburn University. The lab is a pretty unique center. It's focused on the business case and the technical implementation of emerging technologies in retail, aerospace, and automotive industries. The broader efforts of the lab can best be categorized as the digitization and serialization of the supply chain. So whether that's Nike and Vans trying to manufacture and deliver shoes, or that's the International Space Station trying to deploy some infrastructure to help the astronauts up there make better decisions and get things done quicker. It really is a broad application space that we work with. And while RFID is in the title, there's a lot more technologies that we take into consideration, blockchain being one of those.
Awesome. Okay, so that's a really good transition into, how did you even get into the cryptocurrency and blockchain space? So first of all, let's just attack your background. Very impressive. Obviously, you got to put your hands on a lot of different things in marketing and in e-commerce and everything with that. And so as you're maneuvering through that, you get out of that space and you're like, okay, I want to explore new opportunities. You're like, all right, let's look at RFID. And then I guess this is when you learn about blockchain. And now this is your insertion into this space, or kind of walk us how that process happened.
Sure. So it's funny. We actually have to jump back in time a little bit. It was in 2014 I first came across Bitcoin. So I was actually in high school then. I went to a pretty small high school, and it was probably best categorized as a liberal arts school. So there wasn't a whole lot of finance, economics, that sort of thing. But that was a hobby of mine, if you can call that an interest. So I bought and still own a couple of the For Dummies books. I think I had one on finance, one on investing. And it was just something I did in my spare time. So I guess that makes me a nerd, but I was all about it. So, but it was back then when I first came across an article about Bitcoin. I don't have much of a background in computer science, but I did my best to understand what was unique about it and annotate the white paper and really get a basic understanding of, in Bitcoin's sense, what blockchain was. I actually convinced my economics teacher back in 2014 to allow me to trade cryptocurrencies for our stock market game. Before I could do that, I had to explain to him what it was, and I think I did probably a pretty poor job. But back then, no one really knew what it was, or at least I had no idea, and I did my best to educate. But So that was kind of my introduction to it. That was when I first came across it and started to develop an interest in it. So over the years, I kept learning about it, studying it. I was excited by it, and I really didn't know if I would have an opportunity to work in the space, even though it was something I was very interested in. And it wasn't until 2017 when I began working at the RFID Lab that I began to see that opportunity, and the dots began to connect for me to really see the potential application of blockchain and supply chain and the different problems that it could help solve. And that really was, like I said, when those wheels started to turn, and I began to develop that understanding and that vision of what exactly blockchain could do for supply chain.
Okay. And so as you begin to look into this, and you're now working in this RFID lab at Auburn and looking at everything, you started to get involved with the CHIP program, which is the Chain Integration Pilot Program. So what is it, and how did it get started?
CHIP was kind of a spin-off project, actually. Initially, when I began at the lab, after a couple months, I took over as project lead for a national data exchange study that we were conducting with some of our brand and retail partners. And because retail is an industry that has adopted RFID the most, we do have a lot of, like I said, retailers and brand owners and logistics providers that work with us on projects on a pretty regular basis. But the purpose of this project was to facilitate data exchange between trade partners. So we would take a couple different data streams from a retailer and a couple different data streams from a brand owner, and we would compare those, and we would try to match them up and verify what the existing systems were saying, and also maybe establish a better business case for serialization and on-level technologies in the supply chain. So this data exchange study was huge. Like I said, there was over a dozen brands and retailers, many of which were in the S&P 500. There was countless actual touch points in all these facilities. And at the end of the day, our team of mostly graduate and undergraduate students was trying to clean and compile and compare millions and millions and millions of records, all of which were in completely different formats. We probably had 35 unique data streams that were coming our way for the course of this project. So we spent the majority of our resources just trying to dissect that data to a point where we could draw conclusions and inferences and actually deliver some value to some of the partners. So that really established the business case. That helped us see firsthand the need for better communication and visibility throughout the supply chain. Because if we hadn't have been there to kind of be the middleman and facilitate the data exchange, we definitely would not have been able to uncover some of the flaws and some of the errors that were present in current supply chain systems.
Right. And man, just to deal with that much data and just all the different points that you could use it once you received all this data, like how were you able to interpret it and then use it to give quantitative feedback that you could then use on the blockchain that was solving a problem for other people?
That first project, Zipper, the one that I've tried to describe, is this was actually pre-blockchain, right? This was we're doing this the old school way. We're sending files over email, grabbing them from FTP servers, and everything in between. And it's what led us to the realization of, well, wait a minute, like, what if we just put a blockchain-based system in place and let all these different partners plug into it? But the role that RFID plays in this whole blockchain space is pretty straightforward. While it can be a very complicated technology, at the end of the day, what it truly is a serialization solution. It is a technology that you can put into practice to identify items. And you can be applying a RFID tag, or some people call them a sensor, I guess. It really is just another variation of IoT technology. But you can slap an RFID tag on a tire, on a pair of shoes, on an airplane part, on just about anything. And you can identify that item with a unique, let's call it like a license plate or something like that. Yeah. Every item is different from another. And so many of the partners that we work with here at the lab have these systems deployed. So they have the capability of identifying every item, and they have the capability of utilizing that information. And so that's what we were trying to help facilitate, to conduct, was extraction of value from that item level information that they had available. And after about a year and a half of trying to sort through the just mass amounts of data, we realized that we could really extract far more value from all that information at hand if we had a system in place for everyone to share, to submit their data, and to extract value from it, primarily with the use of smart contracts. So that is how the blockchain application piece really came into frame.
So with that, are y'all utilizing Ethereum's blockchain model?
So we've played around with Ethereum's blockchain model, mostly on through Microsoft's Azure platform. For the course of the CHIP project, which is kind of spun off as a result of all those learnings, we're going to be working with a Hyperledger Fabric network and a couple different applications from multiple different solution providers to facilitate the interaction with the blockchain itself.
That's really impressive, man. So with all of this that's going on, because like this is a big deal. Like I know there's a lot of different blockchain projects out there that are trying to utilize and figure out how to effectively use blockchain as a database, and then be able to use the different data points to give information back to people that they can consume in a easy to digest way, and then utilize it to make things happen. How do you think that this program is helping to revolutionize the supply chain, data exchange, and in the retail and apparel industry?
Like you said, there's a lot of effort out there, a lot of different efforts out there to make sense of blockchain and to plug it into supply chain and figure out exactly how the technology can deliver value. And I think that it's exciting, but it's also challenging because no one's figured it out quite yet. There have been, a number of successful case studies, and I know there's some pilots that are moving to production phase soon. But there's not necessarily a how-to guide to do this. And as a research center based at a university, our goal is to educate and encourage adoption. Much like the Hyperledger community, it's actually something we joined fairly recently. We want people to understand the technology and to put it into practice. And so as we work through steps 1, 2, 3, however many steps there are, and actually deploy the technology in a way that makes sense, and delivers valuable insights to the customers, we've got to have a plan. We've got to have a path that we can forge and then allow others to follow. And I think that, we think of some of the largest supply chain blockchain projects that most people are familiar with. There's Food Trust, there's TradeLens. I know that Everledger had a number of really interesting case studies with luxury goods and diamonds and wine, and a number of our partners here at the lab were actually engaged on a number of those projects. So we've got a good community going here, a good consortium, I guess is probably a better word. But none of those none of those projects have looked at tracking item level goods. From what I know about TradeLens, it wasn't necessarily focused on identifying individual units within cartons, within pallets, within shipping containers. Food Trust also was essentially case level. So, let's say you have 10 boxes of strawberries in a single case. What you're doing is you're assigning a case ID to each of those items. So you can you can assume that, as long as the items stay in the case, that are what they are. But because we're trying to work at an item level and utilize existing RFID infrastructure and other serialized systems like QR code and things like that, we're dealing with data on a much larger scale with a lot broader focus because we're working with international brands and retailers. And gotcha. that's a roundabout way of saying I really do believe that the implications of this project span a lot further than simply retail and apparel. It's going to affect any blockchain deployment that is focused on tying physical goods into a digital environment. RFID is one way to do that, to assign a digital identity to a physical item. There's many other ways, but it doesn't really matter what the subject of what you're trying to trace in the project. It's all going to follow a common method. There's going to be a path that we're hoping to establish and to fine tune and to deliver to just about anybody that wants to use it on how do you actually put the technology into practice.
Gotcha. Wow. Well, I know, just like you said, we're at the beginning of this and there's no blueprint to figuring this out. But with all the resources that are being poured into this and just seeing like how the world economy is moving to blockchain and how, Walmart's pouring, billions of dollars into figuring out like these kind of processes. IBM's doing the same on the data side, and so many countless others. We're at the beginning of this forefront of emerging tech, and I think that it's really awesome that you're getting to be at the forefront at this over at Auburn University. But for any college students or anybody who like hears about these technological opportunities like the one that you're describing, how can more students start to get involved in blockchain projects like this?
So I think the first step that I've recommended to others and I've taken myself is to build a knowledge base. Interest is important, but I think that having expertise to show or an understanding to share to whatever it is you're trying to become a part of, whether that's an interest group or whether that's an actual project or whether you're just looking for a job. I think that having a deep knowledge base in the area is essential. And it's also not that hard to develop. Most students are familiar with study mode. Regardless of where they are in school, they probably know how to consume content and to understand, and not just to regurgitate, but to remember and to reiterate in different ways. And personally, I got in touch with the Blockchain Training Alliance a couple of years ago when they were really just kicking things off, and they were extremely helpful. And they cut a deal with me because broke college kid, and I was able to obtain some training and build that knowledge base. So I think that that's step number one for any student that's interested in it. Step two is just to show some initiative because, like you said, blockchain is an emerging technology. There's a wide open frontier out there, but because it's so new, there's not necessarily an established career path for someone that wants to work specifically in blockchain. So it definitely takes a little more effort, a little more energy to kind of work through a more unstructured path. And I think initiative goes a long way because it demonstrates a sincerity, I guess, more a seriousness for that interest. And personally, I think that actions speak a lot louder than words. And so I could talk about this stuff all day, but what I really want to do is deliver, because I think that a successful pilot where all the different corporate partners are educated and engaged and excited and ready to put it into practice, I think that speaks volumes a lot more than maybe a fan club that I've started or I've been a part of.
Right. And you bring up a lot of valuable points, and education is key. And a big reason I want to bring you on the show, and how everyone that comes through this show, is to educate people and just to let them know about opportunities in this space. The opportunities are so various and so wide and so massive that first you have to know that an opportunity is there. Then once you find something that resonates with you, that's when you can go deeper and get more knowledge and figure out a way like, how can I get involved and how can I leave my mark in this space as all of this starts to develop. So I really think that's really valuable advice.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, it all starts with education, and because it's such a new space and it's growing so quickly, it's hard to stay up to date on all the new developments, new technologies. I mean, I've spent most of my time, I wouldn't say most, I'd probably say the majority. I don't think those are necessarily synonyms, but studying Hyperledger technologies and the application and the use cases that make sense. And it's been a while since I've dove deep into Ethereum and all the new developments there. And so I think that because everything's changing so quickly, education isn't necessarily the first step you take and then you move on to the next one. It's just a recurring requirement if you want to stay sharp and you want to continue to be a useful tool for whatever project you're being used for.
Absolutely. And you just brought up a good point of transition. So as you are or have been in the space of both cryptocurrency and blockchain, and as you're learning a little bit more and just seeing everything that's been happening in the market lately, and 2019 has been a very solid year in the space, what are some projects that have you excited?
Well, I think that a lot of the developments with Ethereum and then the interoperation between Ethereum and Hyperledger have been very exciting. I think that initially when I was doing my investigation and learning about all the different solutions that are out there, everyone, not just myself, were concerned about scalability and that sort of thing, throughput for a lot of the public blockchains. I think that those communities have rallied and they've done an excellent job of answering a lot of those questions and addressing some of those concerns. Because I really do think that, I wouldn't pit Ethereum and Hyperledger against each other as competitors. I think that there's many different use cases that make more sense for one over the other. But the fact that both of those communities are collaborating and are working together to create a broader ecosystem that is functional and that is collaborative and cooperative, I think that is really exciting. Like I said, I was trying to follow everything I could from Consensus last week, and there were so many big announcements and so many companies that are going to be active in the space finally. And I think that because everything is changing so rapidly, it is just a fun environment to be a part of.
No, definitely. And right now, if you were to look, I saw a meme or a picture the other day that was just talking about, the rise and fall from 2017 to 2018 to 2019 right now. Like, what's the difference? So like when 2017, when the last time Bitcoin hit $8,000, if you look at that compared to now, you have companies that are accepting Bitcoin like Starbucks and Whole Foods and a plethora of others. You have investment institutions that are getting ready to sell it on their markets. You have just so much money and resources that are being poured into the space to actually give it value in use case, whereas before a lot of it was pure speculation. So now's a really exciting time just to be in the entire cryptocurrency space. And I also like Ethereum a lot. And again, everyone, this is not financial advice, but there's just so much being built on top of it, and so many projects that stem from its original blockchain that it just has way too much momentum behind it to not be successful, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And I always try to be slightly skeptical when I approach different, whether it's an investing opportunity or whether it's a solution I'm trying to evaluate. But I agree with you. I think that the utility of Ethereum is so broad, and it's. I feel like every other day, there's definitely some very popular and prominent Hyperledger deployments, but I think that in terms of enterprise application, it really is growing significantly for the Ethereum community. But I agree with you that, once again, not qualified to give investment advice, but I'm also bullish on Ethereum.
Good deal. Well, man, Allan, you dropped a lot of great knowledge and just awesome stuff that y'all are working on over at Auburn. But as we are wrapping up this interview, I always like to leave our listeners with a final thought. What is a final thought that you want to leave with everyone today?
I think the final thought would be just an encouragement to keep learning. It's easy to learn information from one point in time and to just assume that information is continue to be true. But as most people know, things change very rapidly, especially in emerging technology space. So kind of what we talked about earlier, that continued education is key. And believe me, I'm sick of school. I just got done with 4 years of it, but I'm not going to let that stop me from reading everything I can and absorbing as much information as possible.
Absolutely. And knowledge is power. And the only way that you get it is by educating yourself and just keep finding ways to be ahead of the game. And you're doing that, everyone who's listening today, by listening to this podcast. So thanks for doing that. And for everyone, Allan, thank you so much for being on the show. What are some different ways that people can connect with you and learn more about the various projects that you're working on?
Sure. So personally, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. That's a great way to get in touch. There's a number of resources that I can share if you want to know more about the project or the partners or just the entire scope of the project. And I'll share some links with you, Richard, if that's acceptable, and maybe some show notes that you post afterwards.
Definitely.
We can direct people towards those resources if they're interested in them. But LinkedIn is the best way to do it.
Perfect. Well, Allan, thank you so much for being on the show today, and for everyone that's listening, stay cryptocurrent.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode of Cryptocurrent. For more information on this episode and all of our episodes, please visit us at www.crypto-current.co. Stay up to date with the latest news in cryptocurrency by signing up for our newsletter. You will receive a daily email Monday through Sunday that is personalized and curated content specific to you and your interest, powered by artificial intelligence. Are you an accredited investor looking to invest in cryptocurrency? Crescent City Capital can help. Go to crescentcitycapital.com for more information. Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the quality of this podcast. I can only thank my amazing producer, Andrew DeRitter, with DeRitter Productions, who has put this together. If you have any podcast, visual, or video needs, please go to DeRitterProductions.com. That's DERITTER Productions.com.
This has been another episode of Crypto Current, bringing you one step closer to becoming a crypto and blockchain aficionado. We look forward to giving you the latest in crypto news and analyses next week. Stay crypto current.
Please use available exits now.